At the dawn of the 20th century, an Italian physicist, Guglielmo Marconi, changed the world of codes forever. Marconi's invention harnessed radio waves as a new method of communication. The result was an instantaneous transmission of messages across long distances.
The invention of the radio was the most important single event in the history of codes and ciphers. Radio had the great effect of facilitating communications. You don't have to lay wire or anything like that. You can just go out with a radio post and communicate. But it has the great disadvantage of turning over to the enemy every message that you send. So this means you have to put into code every message that you send. So it stimulated enormously the great growth of codes and ciphers.
The ramifications of this new invention were not lost upon the generals. Radio allowed quick communication with field divisions and a more rapid, mobile form of warfare. Radio messages were enciphered and sent in Morse code across the airwaves. But radio transmission revealed every cryptogram it conveyed. It furnished a constant and massive stream of intercepts to the enemy. With the outbreak of World War I, the need for new codes and code breakers sharply escalated. A global battle of secret communications had begun. On August 5, 1914, British divers from the ship Telconia severed German cable lines in the North Atlantic.
It appears their idea was simply to make things more difficult for the Germans, but it had the payoff of forcing a great deal of traffic that would have gone by cable onto radio. And so it resulted in really a flood of intercepts coming in that otherwise wouldn't have been available.
Once intercepted, messages were sent to Room 40, the cryptanalysis section of the British Admiralty.
Room 40 might be the prototype of modern cryptanalytic organizations. They recruited mathematicians, linguists, chess masters, anybody who was good at puzzle solving.
In September 1914, Britain received one of the greatest gifts in the history of cryptology. Her allies, the Russians, captured the German cruiser Magdeburg in the Baltic and a book of Germany's main naval code. They promptly turned the code book over to Room 40, allowing Britain to break German naval messages and bottle up Germany's battleships for the duration of the war. Code breaking had transformed modern combat.
Being able to read the German naval signals often almost instantaneously was something that simply hadn't happened before in warfare.
On the Eastern Front, cryptography, or lack of it, led to one of the most critical battles in World War I. In late August 1914, the Russians sent two armies into East Prussia in a pinchers movement to trap the Germans near the village of Tannenberg. The Germans were outmanned, but had the advantage of listening in on Russian radio communications. Due to the Russians' rudimentary and disorganized coding system, intercepts told the Germans that the Russian Southern Army was moving faster than its northern force. The Germans wheeled and destroyed the Russian Southern Army, capturing 100,000 prisoners, with an estimated 30,000 dead or missing.
This was the first great defeat of the Russians in the war, and it started them on their long slide into ruin and revolution. The Russians did not, at World War I, have a good cipher system, and in part they lost the war because of it.
But the greatest code-breaking event in the history of cryptology began on January 17, 1917. The British intercepted a telegram that was encrypted with the highest German diplomatic code, 0075. It was a mind-numbing system of 10,000 words and phrases attached to 1,000 numerical code groups. The secret message was from the German Foreign Minister, Arthur Zimmermann, to his ambassador in Washington, Johann von Bernstorff, for relay to Germany's ambassador to Mexico, Heinrich von Eckhardt. The telegram would be deciphered there and sent to Mexico's president, Venustiano Carranza.
It was sent from Berlin to Washington encrypted on the American undersea telegraph cable. The British intercepted it there, recognized its importance. It was in a new diplomatic system which the British had not yet broken.
After receiving the message in the new 0075 code, von Bernstorff's office in Washington then made a fatal mistake.
In Washington, they took this telegram out of the new diplomatic code book, re-encrypted it in the old diplomatic code book, and sent it to Mexico City on the telegraph.
But the British had already broken the old code.
The British intercepted that version as well, had versions to compare. Perhaps the silliest, most tragic error that a cryptographer can make.
British cryptanalysts began to decipher the message in the old code in painstaking chunks, constructing patterns using pencil and paper. Within days, they had it. As the meaning of Zimmerman's secret message began to emerge, the import was stunning. Despite the sinking of the American ocean liner Lusitania by the Germans in 1915, America maintained its neutrality with the promise of German restrictions on its U-boats. The Zimmerman telegram outlined Germany's intent to resume unrestricted submarine warfare on February 1st, 1917, as a means to strangle Britain. To keep America at bay, Zimmerman proposed that Mexico invade the United States and reclaim Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Germany also asked Mexico to persuade Japan to attack America. The actions would be backed with German military and financial aid. The British Admiralty was desperate to get the deciphered message to the Americans without alerting the Germans that their code had been broken. A British agent was able to infiltrate the Mexican telegraph office and retrieve a deciphered copy of the message to Mexico's president. Once they had their cover of a supposed leak in Mexico, the British approached the Americans and revealed the telegram.
The whole country blew up. Everybody was incensed. Formerly, only the East Coast was concerned. Now, suddenly, the whole Midwest was worried about Mexico. And 6 weeks after this message was deciphered, the United States declared war on Germany. So it was probably the most significant event in code-breaking history and certainly in intelligence history.
What the Zimmerman telegram did was convince the entire country that Germany was a national enemy. And a few months later, when Woodrow Wilson asked for a declaration of war, he had a united and angry country behind him, ready to go to war against the Germans.
A single breakthrough by the cryptanalysts in Room 40 had succeeded where 3 years of intensive diplomacy had failed. Code breaking would play an even greater role in cryptology's golden age, World War II.